With us today, I'm Johnny Robertson, and we are on our morning broadcast. What does the Bible say, school? If you can remember WDTBS in the future, that's the way I'll refer to the broadcast. What does the Bible say? And so we always are wanting you to remember that these broadcasts are archived. We will be putting them in a playlist, if you know how that works. Eventually, I'll have a playlist where you just click Genesis. I think Caleb already has his Luke classes in a playlist so that you can just actually see them in order. So my cell phone number, 276-806-2150. And the Gmail account is joeblue81@gmail.com. Now, I'm going to be offering some books today, so I want you to make sure that you realize you can go back on the YouTube channel. You can actually pull this up and you can go back and look at the books and you tell specifically which one you want. Now, it's going to be kind of like a cafeteria style thing, a buffet. And when you go to the buffet and there's just everything in the world, they really encourage you not to fill your plate up just because everything's there. These books are very expensive from the standpoint of us getting them in play and then getting them out. It's an expense that we pretty much bear. Now, there are some good brethren that send funds for the books. We tell them they're free, but they go ahead and send money for postage and whatnot. We really do appreciate that. That enables us to replace not only the book that we gave them, but generally we can get 10 or 20 more with what they send. So I'm just saying the books are free. If you're a person who's getting them, don't waste them, because we can only get so many books and we want them to get them into the hands of people that are going to read them. So it's just basically we're saying it is a Christian attribute for us to have the mindset of, if there are people out there that are not really going to read these books, but because they're free, it's like, well, I'm going to take advantage of that. You might be taking a book from someone who is in fact a real student and is really trying to learn and is trying to encourage others. So just food for thought. And so we'll do that here in a bit. We will bring that up. So tell a friend about what does the Bible say. And all they have to do is type in, go on YouTube, and all they have to do is just type in my name, Johnny Robertson. It's going to come up. Ours will be the first one in the YouTube lineup. And so remember, our broadcasts also, we do live shows on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, Thursday 8 p.m. Eastern. These are all live shows, and they are shows that Caleb will do one, then I'll do the next night, and then he'll do the next night, and then we have the daytime TV. And so we're really putting out a lot of broadcasts, and so we want you to tell a friend. And it's not somebody say, well, y'all are just trying to get views. Listen, we are not trying to get views. We're trying to strengthen individuals in the church. We are already beyond the worry about views. The ability to get a freestanding, like standalone YouTube channel up, and where we are right now, we're not worried about any of that. We're trying to get information into people's minds so that they can benefit. And so this morning we're actually we're going to start our Tuesday class, and I hope that you're up with me. I sent out not an email, but a Facebook post telling that we are actually going to be looking at Genesis 24 today. Now, I don't really like doing the friend thing. Let's just see where I am right now. Sometimes it tells me how many people are actually waiting to be friended. And I just learned not too long ago that when I do allow someone to be friends with me, it gives them a notification that we're going on. Now, I did not know that, or that I had actually posted something. I didn't know that until lately, so I had quit friending people a long time ago, just because in a way, it clutters up your. I don't do the news feed, but Lori looks at my news feed sometimes and see what's going on. And so these are just points that you might need to know. If I don't friend you, it doesn't mean that I'm not wanting to be in association or acquaintance with you. It's just, it just at this point, it's more than I want to deal with, and so I do send out notifications that we're about to go on, and if you don't get a notification that I just put something on Facebook, you have to take my apology. I didn't really realize that's how it worked with friends, and so if you do get a notification from me, you could share it with your friends and help me out. That way people would know that we're about to go on, and it would give them an opportunity. Now, it really doesn't matter if they watch it live or not. To me, it doesn't change anything in regard to how I feel about it. A lot of people watch it on their way to work. A lot of individuals watch it late at night. We're able to see on our analytics page what goes on, and a lot of the traffic's at night, and so these are in the daytime, so it really doesn't bother me one way or the other. So this morning, I am going to, this is not really review, but it is extremely important that you realize that if you did not take advantage of some of the things that we said early on about paying attention to families and places, then you would have missed an entire segment this morning. As a matter of fact, a person absolutely cannot understand what is going on in Genesis chapter 23 and the significance of Abraham sending Isaac away in Genesis 24 in order to, or sending someone, his servant Eliezer, to get Isaac a wife. You will not be able to process it. It's absolutely impossible to gather the information or to have the information come into your mind if you haven't kept up on your learning at the genealogical records. Now, I know Caleb is on this. He's doing the life of Christ from a geographical standpoint. He's following the travels of Jesus. He is keying in on the places, and in perspective, you would be basically hearing about places that Jesus, or even Jesus' mother and father, where they were, and as you learn about those places, they are actually now put in perspective. In other words, you're seeing them for the importance that they actually have, the importance of the places have, as they're being put in front of you. So it's a learning tool, and we're doing the same thing. We're trying to make sure that you realize that the children of Israel that are coming out of Egypt, they are the beneficiaries of the book of Genesis first. They are hearing the records. They are being reminded if they don't know. Some people do keep up with things, like we have family members in both my family on my side and my wife's side that keep up with who's who. And when they die, we're going to have a hard time in the sense of remembering some of the different things that different people and where they're located, and it's very important, especially when you're in a position where you're trying to help your family and your friends with the gospel. You have to keep up with who's who, and sometimes you need to be talking to someone about something and you're talking to the wrong person, and that person could in fact actually undo your plans because you didn't have your people in order. I know people that are in their 90s, and these individuals still have influence on their younger family members, like grandchildren. If a person is 90, they probably have great-grandchildren, and they may be wanting me to help them with their great-grandchildren. So it is very beneficial. You get this, but you don't get it when you read the Bible. And I'm trying to impress upon you this morning that reading and studying, they're so different. You can read Genesis 10, but if you don't learn Genesis 10, you absolutely will not get Genesis 23, and Genesis 24. Now, the way I want to begin this morning is I kind of want to begin in a general way in regard to trying to maybe help us all to think about why we are studying the Bible in the first place. And you might say, that's just ignorant. No. We are constantly in need of reminding ourselves of how important the Bible is, because I know from just being in the United States that the Bible is in competition with a lot of other things. And the Bible gets left out. The competition, the worldly material things, they're winning, and the Bible is losing. And if that's the case, you are a loser as well. I don't mean that like this, but I'm saying you're losing out on what God intended. Some people say, I don't want to be managed, by the Bible. Well, if you're not being managed by the Bible, you're probably being managed by a preacher. If you know the Bible, then you won't have the weakness. The preacher will not have the ability to actually be leading you and sending you places where you don't really need to go, and getting you to do things that you really don't need to do. You need to have your own Bible knowledge, and that's extremely important when you're looking at the Bible itself. Notice how Paul told Timothy, this is what he wanted him to do. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who will teach others also. Is it going to be easy? No. Endure hardness. Look at this. Endure hardness. What? As a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Listen, folks, I get this, and I try to get other people to understand this. You know, let me just say this at this point. There's a lot of things, rumors that are swirling around about me right now. And do you know that it is the case in many of the instances that the things that are being said, I actually told on myself? And the reason I do that, I actually tell my own flaws and my own faults in classes that we've had when we were running our different segments of our school at Martinsville. On 2 or 3 different occasions, we've had individuals going through a regular series of classes. I will tell the guys, the men, events associated with my life, even while I'm a preacher, things that would create shame and difficulty for my family and for me and for you probably, possibly. Well, a few times, not that many, but right now, individuals have decided to tell some of the stories that I've told them. That's fine. They were yours. I gave them to you. And I am fully prepared to endure hardness as a soldier. Now, why would I do that to myself? For instance, there is a story going around about me when I was in the cancer center. And some of it's true and some of it's not. Some of the facts that are being put forth as truth, they're not actually true, but some of it is true. Well, how did those facts get out there? How did that information get out there? You know how it is when people retell a story. I told the story to the preacher students, to the men that I was trying to get to be these men right here. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. I told those things on myself. Why? Why would any Christian do that? Why would they tell their misdeeds? Because I want you to realize that if you start having trouble, you can talk to me, because I'm the kind of person who will tell you about my hardships and my failings and my flaws. And so I do that to try to help you to realize, or help you be able to deal with the hardness of being a soldier of Christ, because it's going to be hard, especially if you're going to be trying to preach and you're trying to encourage other individuals. They're going to give it to you. I mean, people talk some serious trash to me, members of the church. We had a men's business meeting 2 weeks ago. Individual in that business meeting talked to me like I was dirt. Fine, I will be dirt soon. Came from the dirt, I'll turn to dirt. That's just how it goes. Now, some individuals just can't take that. Oh, you can't talk to me that way. Listen, you can talk to me any way you want to. I am nobody. I'm just a soldier of Jesus Christ, and I don't have to have your respect. You don't have to treat me like I'm some high up individual, because I'm not. I'm a servant. I mean, you should be able to know by now that I am a servant. Anybody who does 28 hours a month on television, live TV, Caleb and I are splitting this. And when he's sick, I'm trying to make up for it. When I'm sick, we put in some of our DVDs or whatever. Like if I don't finish this 2-hour segment, I would be playing Caleb's hermeneutic class today. And so, you see what I'm saying? This is extremely important, and we're trying to get this into the minds of individuals who will teach others also. Now, what we want to do this morning, as just a general introduction, is we basically want to talk about why you need the Bible. Why do you need this information? The reason that you need this information is because it is good for you. Let's basically, I'm going to look, this is 1 John 3:4, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is a transgression of the law. Now, I want to talk to you about sin just for a moment. Now, I'm going to use another verse, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, 37. And I'm going to click on, and we're going to let our little handy-dandy Greek dictionary pop up. This is Paul, and he's saying to individuals in Corinth, he has a lot of trouble in Corinth. If any man think himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things that I write unto you are the commandments of the Lord. Okay, you ready? I want us to look at this word commandment. Right here it is. It is this Greek word. We're going to click on a larger dictionary so that you can actually get a chance to read it. Now, I want to ask you this question. If you had been in the Garden of Eden, if you were Adam and your wife was Eve, and you were basically the one who committed the transgression, the commandment was there. What does commandment mean? Right here it is. Prescription. The commandment was there, and you did what they did, and let's just say that God stepped in and said, okay, I'm going to talk to you two. What are we going to do about this sin problem? What would you say? What do you think your response would be back to God? What are we going to do about this sin problem? We went against the prescription. There was a prescription that God had put forth, a commandment, and we broke it. And what are we going to do about this sin problem? Well, I don't think people have really even thought about this. I don't think people have considered what it's like to have to be God. Because a lot of people do complain about the commandments. They look at them as something that is binding you or holding you back from treasures and pleasures and just all kinds of things. But really, the commandment is a prescription. So I want you to think about this. If you said, okay, I am going to think about this. What would I do if I was in the position of God, or if God asked us, what are we going to do about the sin problem? Well, here's basically something for you to think about. Do you realize that God is actually creating an atmosphere, not just for Adam and Eve, because Adam and Eve are going to have children. Now, I want you to think about your own children. When you have your own children, you basically start setting boundaries, and those boundaries are actually set because they are for your child's safety. Like, for instance, when the child is really small, a lot of times people put gates on their stairs so that the child can't go through that, or gates on the door so the child can't go through that, or between your cabinet and your door going into the kitchen. You may have some obstacle there so that it's a boundary. Keeps the baby from crawling in and opening the cabinet under the sink where all of the cleaning products are. So what you're doing for your first child is you're setting up boundaries, and you're doing that for the child's safety, for the child's well-being. So then you have another child, and as it is the case, children actually will vie for attention because, hey, they love you. They want your attention. It's an extension of their will. They want to be emotionally charged, or they want to receive some emotional feeling, or it's actually enzymes that are released when you have an emotional connection and you receive that emotional care that you're seeking or desiring, or maybe it's not care, it's just basically being hugged. You feel loved. And so siblings have rivalry for their parents' emotions. And so then you have to basically set up boundaries, and you have to set up these boundaries in order that the two children don't end up being hateful to each other, one feeling left out, things of that nature. See what you're actually doing? You are trying to create an environment for civility. You're trying to create an atmosphere where everybody is equally loved and taken care of, and that you have a cohesive family, and you have individuals that are growing up healthy. They're not dysfunctional. This is very important. And so in one sense, we have, in many ways, we have like totally abandoned this in regard to what used to be in the family unit, because everybody's working and somebody else is taking care of the kids, and maybe your kids are being babysit by persons in sports arenas. And what do you mean by that? Well, basically, sports, just face it, your child's not going to be Michael Jordan. I mean, I'm not trying to insult you, but your child's not going to be Michael Jordan, and it's not going to be Tiger Woods. So, Bjorn Borg, or whatever his name is, none of that. There's only just such a minute chance. You might as well you might as well set it up that your child's going to win the lottery, and you don't even let them buy lottery tickets as to think that your child is really going to excel later on in sports. It's pretty likely your child's going to go to work just like everybody else. And so, while this business with sports, it's babysitting. Have y'all not caught on to this? The coaches babysit. It's a whole lot of attention that is given to your child where you do other things and you run around and pick them up and you get the things done that you're wanting to do. All of that is taking away from the environment that we are supposed to be responsible for as parents in order to bring our children up to be functional as God would have us do it. These are boundaries. And God has set them. Well, I don't like them. I don't like the fact that my kids, you're telling me my kids can't do sports. You can do what you want to. I'm not telling you anything. That's what we have, free will. We didn't do sports. Why? Because I recognized early on that none of my kids were going to be Michael Jordan, or they weren't going to be champions in any of that. So what's the point? Well, don't you want them to have fun? Listen, there's plenty of ways we can have fun without getting involved in something I'd spend a whole lot of money on for nothing and all my time, when I could actually have my children and be molding them. You see what we're saying here? This is God. This is God basically allowing us for the moment to look at what He has done about the sin problem, because you know when Adam and Eve leave the garden, they're going to have children. And what happened? One of their children killed the other. Civility. You see what we're talking about here? So what we're doing is we're studying the prescriptions, the boundaries. They're good for us. Prescriptions are good. And if you don't even know the prescriptions, if you don't know how any of this works, you know, when you go to your doctor these days, man, they give you a list of stuff that you don't need to be taking while you're taking this other stuff. I mean, there's so much medicine out there now, and the doctors at least pharmacists try to keep up with what actually does not interact well with other medicines, but they don't do a good job. Guess what? God is doing the same thing. There are many things that you can mix into your life that does not interact well. It just absolutely makes a mess of the other prescriptions that you're trying to follow. And so this morning, as we go through this, we are looking at people that God has chosen out for us to keep a record of for hundreds of years, and in some cases over 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years. And we're getting to look at them up close and personal. And guess what? They're following prescriptions. And the major character in this particular area or episode or time frame where we are in Genesis is Abraham and his direct descendants. And who is listening to this first? The children of Israel that came out of the promised land. They're getting boundaries set up for them too. A brand new religious system built on the top of an older religious system that they would have been used to a certain degree. And new commandments. Oh, new commandments? Oh no. More commandments? Look at this. Don't be that way. When you talk about commandments, you're talking about prescriptions. Please try to remember that. It's like you people and y'all's commandments. All right, watch this. Galatians 3:19. Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgressions. What does that mean? That you need more information, more prescriptions. Life becomes more complicated as you go along. Just take, for instance, let's just take this for instance. In Genesis 21, we studied last week that Hagar had her child actually removed from being in the same place as Isaac. So Sarah basically says, I do not want the child of this bondwoman to be with my child. And Abraham gave in. That's in Genesis 21. Well, that's not really a very civil thing to do, is it? When you really think about it, that's poor Ishmael and Hagar. And we looked at the fact that she ended up being taken care of by God. She thought the child was going to die, and she put him over in an area where she wouldn't see him die, and she lifted up her voice and she wept. And God stepped in and said, I see you. And he told her the progression that would take place with with Ishmael. So that's the firstborn child, and the firstborn child is actually put out, and the child of Sarah, it replaces it. Okay, Deuteronomy 21 puts a stop to that. In Deuteronomy 21, there basically becomes a prescription for how children, firstborn children, are not going to be allowed to be put aside because maybe another one is loved more. See what we're saying? Is that good or is that bad? Is that not an addition? Is that not a helpful thing? It's a boundary that God sets up. He changes some things in regard to marriage and divorce also in Deuteronomy 24. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a bad thing from the standpoint of the divorces that are taking place. But that's basically something that is an extension of our will. Individuals don't always keep their covenants. And so you've got to do something. You're just going to go have everybody killed that doesn't keep their covenant? And you know that's part of the law, the strictness of the law, because marriage is such an important thing. Why is marriage such an important thing? Because children come out of marriages. And so all of a sudden, if you're not paying attention and you're really thinking properly about marriage, and then you have children, and then you decide you don't really like this mate or you don't want this mate, what are you going to do with the children? Well, often there's not a lot of thought put into that. And so this is extremely important. You see what we're doing here? Prescriptions are added. Why? Because of the sins that are being committed and the difficulties that come from these sins. And so everything from language. Why did God introduce different languages? Because individuals were able to do things that they shouldn't do, and they were trying to do things that they didn't need to do, which was building the tower to heaven in Genesis chapter 10. So God confounded the language. And so what did it do? It changed the way that we interact with each other. God knows what He's doing. So here we go. Now, did that make sense? It's pretty hard to be God. And it's pretty hard to manage individuals, especially since we all have free will and we all have different levels of how we curb our appetites and what we think that we should be able to do and not to do. And then you've got people who are strong Christians. And what does that mean? A strong Christian means that you're faithful. Let Titus say it. Titus 2:9. Exhort servants to be obedient unto their masters and please them well in all things, not answering again, not purloining, but showing good fidelity. We have banks that are actually named Fidelity. Good fidelity, not purloining. The word purloining, you know what it means? It's the idea of pilfering, or it's like people steal, well, I think we've talked about this before. They'll steal pens and markers from work. That's purloining. That's pilfering. That's, maybe you say that's a small level of it. That's how theft actually begins. That's how a person becomes a thief. You allow your conscience not to be bothered by, they got a lot of pens at work. I need some pens at home. So you take some pens home. Well, those pens don't belong to you. Well, it's just, we're talking, don't get excited over a pen. Well, if you were supplying all the pens, let me tell you what, pens are expensive. Ink is expensive. You get this? Purloining. Purloining is the same thing as not giving a man a full day's work for the time that you were paid. That's what purloining is. And so the opposite, good fidelity. Strong Christians are Christians who are faithful. They show good fidelity. Well, what does that mean? They are trying to get other individuals not to misbehave. Why? Because every time you misbehave, every time you're not being faithful, you are messing up the rest of us. I would be messing up the rest of us. And when it's not handled in a congregation, it actually changes the character of the congregation. In other words, when a teacher lets a child say that 4 plus 3 is 8, and there's no correction, then all of the children go out of that class and they think that 4 plus 3 is 8. Well, you said that's what is such a big deal? You start changing the addition of 4 plus 3 in your checkbook, you might say it's just going to be a matter of sense. Okay, maybe you're in that section over there that you're adding 4 and 3 in the cent area. But let's just say that this is a check that's in the hundreds of dollars and you're adding 4 plus 3. Well, you just made a $100 mistake if you think 4 plus 3 is 8. Well, let's say it's in 1,000, on the 1,000 side, and you have the addition that you're doing, 4 plus 3. You just made a $1,000 mistake. So don't tell me that one little thing like 4 plus 3 is not important. It's extremely important, and when individuals are allowed to do things in congregations that are not correct, it changes the outcome of being faithful. And so that's why we try so hard, and that's why you endure hardness as a soldier. If you're a person who is supposed to be in the shepherding business, or if you're supposed to be an evangelist, this is hard work. And so I'm trying to help, and that's why we're doing these classes. Now, I want us to go back to Genesis chapter 23. Now, in Genesis chapter 23, we are basically, we're going to do a humongous stretch in two different directions this morning. We're going to stretch backward to chapter 10, and we're going to stretch forward to chapter 31. What? Yes, you actually need that from time to time. You need to get larger context to be able to tell what's going on. So this morning, as we're reading from Genesis 23, Sarah has died. We talked about this already, but when you are studying a chapter or 2 or 3 chapters, listen folks, there's stuff that you have to come back to, and you have to deal with it in a specific way that you couldn't deal with it while you were dealing with the chapter the first go around, because there was too much information. It would have been impossible to keep your mind focused on all of the things that are going on here. So Sarah was 107 and 20 years, 127 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. The same is Hebron. Now, when he says that, the same as Hebron, he's talking to the children of Israel that are in Exodus, that have come out of Egypt. These individuals actually know things about the land that was not the case when Abraham and Sarah were in it. For instance, small little communities in the days of Abraham and Sarah, by the time Jacob comes on the scene and all of them go into Egypt and stay into captivity, they would actually know that some of these towns had actually changed, and they weren't little small dusty communities. They had changed into something else. The same is Hebron. So as he's talking to them, he's basically telling them it was Kirjath Arba. It's the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So remember, they're the first audience. They're hearing this. You might say, well, they've been in Egypt so long, they would know about Hebron. Listen, you think people are not traveling? Just because they were in Egyptian captivity didn't mean that they weren't able to travel, come and go. I mean, Moses, well, you say, well, Moses was different because he was Pharaoh's daughter's son. That's true. But there are other individuals that would have been couriers, just all kinds of different things working for the Egyptian system. They would know different places. They would know where different places are. You have these people that are traveling in and out of Egypt. How do I know that? Because Jacob and his family was traveling in and out of Egypt. That's how they got into Egypt in the first place. They came to get the grain. Well, who else went to Egypt? Isaac went to Egypt. Abraham went to Egypt. So these individuals are interacting, and they know these different things. And when he writes this, he's telling them this was Kirjath Arba, then Hebron now. And so Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, same as Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Now, very intense right here. Abram stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I'm a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Now, when he says I'm a stranger and a sojourner, that does not mean that he is not known to these individuals. He's simply telling his relationship to them. Don't think they don't know who he is. The children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. Okay, my relationship to y'all, I'm describing it. I'm a stranger. In other words, I'm from another area originally. I don't have land here. I'm a sojourner. I actually am staying in and amongst y'all now. I have this problem, and they're telling us back. We're learning back. No, we know, Abraham, you are a great prince among us. You are a mighty prince among us. Now, Abraham then has this discussion with them about where he's gonna bury. Now, this is going to be important in just a minute. Don't lose me. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth, and he communed with them, saying, if it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat me for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it to me for a possession of a burying place amongst us. Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abram in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that went in at the gate, saying, Nay, my Lord, hear me. The field that I give thee, the field give I thee, and the cave that is therein, I give it to thee. In the presence of my sons, of the sons of my people, give I it to thee, bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land, and he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me, I will give thee money for the field, take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. Ephron, and he spake unto Ephron in the audience, all these people. Ephron answered Abraham, My Lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. Shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury the dead. Bury thy dead, therefore thy dead. Abraham hearkened unto Ephron. Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field that were in all the border round about were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of all the children of Heth before all that went into the gate of his city. And after this, Abram buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre. The same as Hebron in the land of Canaan, and the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. Now, you might be saying, man, you made us suffer through all of that for what? Okay, Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. And the sons of Ham, who are they? Cush, Mizraim, Put, however you want to say it, P-H, Put, and Canaan. So here are the sons of Ham. Who is Ham? Ham is Noah's son. That was basically a curse pronounced upon him for his misbehavior while his father had actually gotten drunk after the flood. So Ham's son is Canaan. Well, let's notice this. In Genesis chapter 10, verse 14, we start hearing the sons of Canaan. And the sons of Canaan, let me make sure that I get this correct. Genesis chapter 10, verse 14. Now, I sometimes do this. This is 15, excuse me. Genesis 10, verse 15. Are you with me? And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Girgashites, and the Hivites, and the Archites, and the Sinites, and the Arvite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Afterwards were the families of Canaanites spread abroad. Now, you see that? These are Canaanites. Well, what is the Canaanite? What's so bad about this? Look at this. Amorites, one of the children of Canaan is the Amorite, and another is Heth. These are actually the Hittites. So the very people that Abraham was told that their iniquity was not yet full in Genesis 15, and that later the children of Israel, the children of Abraham, would come out of Egyptian captivity in the 4th generation, and they would actually take the land away from these people. So when you are hearing, when Moses is narrating this information back to the children of Israel that are about to go back in the 4th generation, they are hearing that Abraham was mingling with these individuals. Now, I'm looking for something right here. right quick that I have to get a hold to before I can go any further. Okay. Let me just see here just a minute. Notice the Amorite. Remember, I'm actually talking about the sons of Canaan, and particularly Heth. This is who he's actually talking to, the sons of Heth. He is a Canaanite. The Hittite Ephron he buys land from him, and it's the cave of Machpelah in the field before Mamre. Okay, now let's go to Genesis chapter 14. In Genesis chapter 14, you probably didn't catch this when we went through it. It's easy to miss things. In Genesis chapter 14, what's going on? Well, in Genesis chapter 14, you remember that Lot has been taken away because he was living in Sodom and Gomorrah. You had the War of the Valley. You had all these kings come in, and they took Lot and all the other people they captured and took them to Damascus. As a result of that, Abraham had to get together all of his servants, I believe 318, trained men in his own house, and he went after Lot, and then he came back with him. Now look at this. This is Genesis 14:13. It actually says, there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite. Now are you getting it? Brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abraham. Now you're adding another layer. These individuals are confederate. Who is Mamre? Well, why are we talking about Mamre? Because Abraham just bought the cave of Machpelah that's in the field, and Mamre is the place. Well, who is Mamre? Mamre is an Amorite. Well, who is this Amorite? He is an Amorite that actually was confederate with Abraham and was involved in all of this goings on in Genesis chapter 14. Now, are you getting the picture now? Here is Abram. He is a stranger. Okay, he is a Hebrew. Abram the Hebrew. He is a Hebrew, which basically means he's on the other side of the river, and he is confederate with these other individuals that live in this land. Now, is that important? Absolutely, it's important. It gives you the idea that, and I'm not saying this in any kind of bad way, I'm just saying they're mingling. Here is Abraham, and he is mingling with the people of the land. It's just natural when you think about it. We all live here together. You would not believe the people that I know in the two states area. Why do I know them? I don't know them well necessarily, but I'm on television, so whenever, used to, we would go in a restaurant before Corona hit, or a store or whatever, and you weren't wearing a mask, the people recognize you. All kinds of people talk to me. All kinds of people want my time, and they have discussions with me. You see what we're doing? We live here. I am a stranger to these people. I'm from Texas, but I sojourn here. I actually am this is my habitation right now. But listen, folks, you have to be careful when you're talking about what we're talking about here. You have to be careful. You're not fixing to walk in front of that camera, are you? So you have to be careful when you are making your friends, and when you're, Jonathan, you have somebody out here that's, they did, but they went around this podium and through there, so it's like very tight up in there. We're doing a live broadcast right now. So, so here's where we were. Abraham is mingling with the people of the land, and Moses is telling the children of Israel that are coming out of Exodus. He's narrating the story of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're about to go in and have war now with these individuals. They need to know the story. They need to know what's going on. And now they're learning that Abraham was actually mingling with the Amorites. I'm not saying this in a bad way. What I'm saying is look how this goes. You actually are mingling with these individuals. Now you've buried your dead in the cave of Machpelah. Mamre is an Amorite. The cave of Machpelah belonged to Ephron, a Hittite, who was living in it amongst the sons of Heth. Who are the sons of Heth? They're children from Canaan, from Ham. Ham was cursed. You remember that? So we're basically saying all of this is going on, and Abraham is right in the middle of it. Now, I want you to ask yourself, did you pay any attention to where you moved? Or did you just like stick your finger down on a map, or didn't even stick your finger on a map? You just drove through the neighborhood and said, I like that house. I think I'll buy it. Oh, is that how that works? Listen, y'all, what we're talking about here is prescriptions for life. Abraham is in and amongst individuals that are actually the cursed people, the people that are going to be removed when their iniquity reaches a certain level, and it's just going to be 4 generations from now. And so it basically means there's already stuff going on. These people are idolaters worse than other areas. And you might be saying, well, okay, well, what about that? Listen, God had Abraham to move out of Ur of the Chaldees for that very reason. And they ended up traveling to Haran, and then he came on into Canaan where God wanted him to be. Evidently, some things going on in Ur of the Chaldees that Abraham would not have been able to handle, given that is the land of his nativity. It's much different when you're living in your own home, is it not? A prophet is not without honor except in his own land or in his own home. Abraham was told to move out, come into another area, and God was going to use him for a particular purpose. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about learning about where you're going to live, who you're going to mix and mingle with, and you're like, man, you're making a lot to do out of this. Why? Okay, let's move back now. Just before Sarah died, the writer, the narrator here, Moses, he actually gives an update on Abraham's family. Just before Sarah dies, in Genesis 22, we're reading an update about how things are going in Haran. Now you might say, well, why do we need to know that? Because Haran is fixing to come up on the scene again. Why? Because Abraham has a son named Isaac, and Isaac does not have a wife. He's basically 40-ish, and he doesn't have a wife, and we just told you who Abraham is mingling with. He is right here in the midst of the direct descendants of Canaan, who is a son of Ham, and we know these individuals are going to be wicked. And he just bought a field from a Hittite, and it's at the edge of Mamre, which is an Amorite. And in particular, they're all called Amorites at some point because they just, I don't know if the Amorites like overtake the entirety of them and represent them all, but that's what he said in Genesis 15:13, that the iniquity of the Amorites is not full. And it consisted of 7 nations by the time it was all said and done. And so why is Haran and Abraham's family important? Because Isaac is about to get a wife. Okay, here we go. And it came to pass, Genesis 22:23, after these things that it was told Abram, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Huz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother. How would you like to have a brother named Buz and another brother named Buz? And Kemuel, the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Bildash, and Jidlap, and Bethuel. Now, if you're a student already of Old Testament, you know that Bethuel is already going to be a prominent individual. Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abram's brother, and his concubine, whose name was, I don't know, Reumah, and she bare Teba, Gaham, Thahash, and Maacah. Now, in sometimes in your own spare time, you might go to 1 Chronicles, and Chronicles has a lot of information also, like what Caleb is dealing with in the New Testament. It chronicles out some of these relatives, and sometimes you'll find things that you did not know. Now, so we just got an update. Why? Well, Sarah has died, and what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is Abram's going to enter into all of this activity with all of these people in the land. He's mingling with these folk in the land, and so he is about to move into the segment, chapter 24. And Abram was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abram in all things. And Abram said unto his eldest servant of his house that ruled over him, that he had, put, I pray thee, thy hand under thy thigh, and I will make thee swear. What are you going to swear? Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto the sons, take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanite among whom I dwell. Did you get that? We don't want my son to marry among the Canaanites. Well, where are they going to go? Who are they going to marry? Now, y'all, I'm going to, like I said, we're going to stretch here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this. But don't think that this is the lesson. I want to get this in your mind. It's a pretty difficult segment here in chapter 24. Let me go ahead and get it up here so that if you happen to be watching, then you know that we're in chapter 24 now. Now, Abraham has talked to his servant, which probably is Eliezer, one born in his own house. And the servant said unto him, peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me into this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest? Abraham said, beware that thou bring not my son thither again. The Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, unto thy seed will I give the land, he shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. Now, why is this so important? Let me just make a point right here. Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to look at, I sometimes get this wrong, so I'm going to go ahead and put it a little bit earlier. 18, let's see. Went too far. Don't take my son back. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country, and truly if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to return. God does not want them to go back. Why? Evidently because of the idolatry that was in that land. God wanted Abraham to be a stranger. He wanted Abraham to have to be on guard. Not like it is in your own home. So now the servant has asked, what if the lady, what if the woman won't come? And this was his answer. He's basically saying, I'm going to trust God to take care of that. We'll discuss this a little bit more at another time. And if the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this oath, my oath. Only bring not my son thither again. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and he sware to him concerning that matter. Now, you get the idea. He's sending his servant back to his own relatives to seek a wife, not from among the Canaanites. Now, that is basically Abraham mingling. Now, I want you to watch what happens. We're going to move ahead right quick. We're going to move ahead to Genesis chapter 26. When you start mingling, guess what? Again, when you talk about where you're going to live, you need to recognize that where you're going to live is going to affect long term very much who your children end up being not just mingled with, but end up marrying. Look what we're seeing here. In Genesis 26:34, and Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mine to Isaac and Rebekah. Now, you see what we just did? Here is Abraham. I'm not faulting Abraham. I'm not saying one thing one way or the other about that. I'm simply telling you, here's the facts. Where you live, with whom you mingle, ends up having a great deal to do with who you end up having as in-laws. It's just that simple. And when we are reading this, if you're not getting the lesson that you need to pay attention to everything you do. Some individuals say, listen, I was born here. So what? What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. I was born in Texas, right outside of Dallas. And where am I now? I live in Cascade, Virginia. And it's a very select place. And you might say, Cascade, isn't that close to Logtown? Yeah, it's close to Logtown. Well, isn't that a dangerous area? It used to be. But I knew about that when I moved to Cascade. But I'm far enough removed where I am. It is very select so that I can actually could raise my family, and I could dictate a lot of things. Why would I do that? Look at what we're reading here. Are you paying attention? Now, both of my sons actually were very careful about their marriages. They did not marry from here. They were looking. Now, I'm not saying you can't marry from here. There's nothing wrong with the people here in this area. It's a very good place to live. I actually prefer it to Texas. I don't really intend to live in Texas again, but I'm saying when you're actually living in an area, it's going to dictate your pool from which you're going to draw the possibilities. Some individuals send their kids off to college so that they can marry somebody else of a select nature. That's not always a good idea either, because you don't know what the people at college are doing over there. You think they're actually doing one thing and they're totally doing another, and your child ends up marrying somebody that's not even a Christian at all, maybe not even know about Christianity. Next thing you know, you have folk from India that are in your family. You got a problem with people from India? Did I say I have a problem with people from India? I'm just telling you how this works. If your son marries an Indian woman, I'm not talking about an American Indian either. I'm talking about somebody from India or Pakistan. Guess what? You're going to have rivals for in-laws. Don't you know most of those individuals are Muslims? See how this works? So if you didn't get this, you were reading, you weren't studying. So Genesis 26, verse 34. Now, that's the first two wives. Look at this. Genesis chapter 27, verse 46. Now, that was Rebekah then. Look at verse 46. Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me? But now are you getting it? Abraham bought a field from the sons of Heth, or from a Hittite named Ephron, that is in and amongst the sons of Heth. Who are the sons of Heth? They are the children of Canaan, the child of Ham. Amorites also is a child of Canaan. Well, what's the Amorite got to do with it? Well, Abram was already in confederacy with the Amorites in Genesis chapter 14, and now you put him buying a field from Ephron the Hittite, who is actually right backed up to Mamre, which is an Amorite. So what has he just done? He is now in the land, and he has his burying place there. Is that important? Well, you just go and start looking at it and watch how many people they bury in the cave of Machpelah. You see what we're saying here? This is extremely important. As far as what we started out with, we started out with the idea of, how would you like to be God? You're in the Garden of Eden, and God basically says, what are we going to do about the sin problem? And you don't even really have a clue, especially as two individuals who don't have any children. You don't know what it's going to be like to have children. So you're not even going to be ready for any of this. And you're not going to be ready for when your children start growing up and they have a rivalry between them. And that first thing you know, Abel is dead. How did that happen? Cain killed him. What were they arguing about? Well, the argument started at worship. That's all I know to tell you. See how this goes? So you're thinking, God says to you, what are we going to do about the sin problem? Well, I don't know, because we're going to continually sin. What is sin? Prescriptions, the commandment, the word is actually easily translated prescription. Do we always take our prescriptions right? Do we always, let's say you got 2 or 3 prescriptions, and the doctor tells you, well, if you take this one while you're taking that one, then you're going to have an adverse effect. That's how it is with commandments, prescriptions. If you don't get all these things straightened out, and if one of your other family members is not following the prescriptions, particularly on marriage, let's say, and they're not paying attention, next thing you know, you have in-laws that are driving you crazy. What are you talking about? Did you not just hear Rebekah say that I am actually weary of my life because of my in-laws? The people that Esau is marrying, well, what kind of person was Esau? The Bible says he was a profane person. He was the kind of person that really didn't pay attention to any of this. He just went with his feelings, with his emotions. Pleasure, man. When you have a child like that, and you're living in a particular area, let's just say, I mean, we all know areas that are known for certain activity. Now, as I say, I am a stranger here. I'm from Texas. I don't know necessarily, I could be speaking out of turn here, but I do know there's some areas up in Franklin County where they used to be big time as far as moonshine, and you had to be careful where you were and what you were doing. Well, let me just ask you, you want to buy a house up in that area? And I'm not saying all of Franklin County. Don't anybody quote me and say, Johnny said all Franklin County is full of moonshine. I did not say that. I'm just saying there was a time, and people around here know that. They know certain areas that have infestations of individuals that would be dangerous, and it could possibly be dangerous. Well, let's just buy I like that house. Well, let's just buy a house over there. Let's don't. Our kids will end up playing with the kids that we're actually talking about. How would you like for your daughter to marry a moonshiner? See what I'm saying? Now, I know I'm blowing that out of proportion, but you just kind of dial it down and go ahead and you think about it. Is this not a good principle? It's a good principle. Now, if we were in Texas, I could tell you immediately that I would not want to go right across the Red River into Oklahoma and situate myself right there. Why? Because that's where all the clubs are. What do you mean? Well, it's been forever that the beer joints were on the Oklahoma side because the Texas side was dry. You talking about rain? No, I'm not talking about rain. I'm talking about liquor. And you couldn't have a club. And so all the craziness and the rambunctious, the killing, the gambling, where was it? Just outside of Hugo, Oklahoma. Just outside of Paris, Texas, on the Red River. I think I'll buy myself a house in Powderly. I don't think so. See what I'm saying? I know that area. You know what? Christian people do not think about this stuff at all. You don't even pay attention. You're just basically looking at the outside. You drive into a community and you're looking at this community, didn't do any investigation, you have no idea who your neighbors are, you have no idea who your children are going to be playing with. None of that is taken into account, and all of it should be taken into account. Is there anything more important than your peace and well-being? Well, most of the time we don't even think about that. When do we start thinking about it? When we lose it, when our peace and well-being starts to be threatened. Did you ever think that you could actually go back and retrace your steps and you could realize, hey, if we had done a little bit of research or if we had paid attention to some of God's prescriptions here, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. Our children wouldn't be the way they are. We wouldn't have the in-laws that we have. See how that goes? That's exactly what we're learning as we go through this. And what did it have to do with? It had to do with genealogy and it had to do with geography, both of which are extremely important. You think the children of Israel that are in the wilderness are not paying attention? I know they're paying attention because Moses is basically narrating this to them and he's teaching them over and over and over. They will have heard about the Amorites so many times in the next 40 years that how these people are, they would actually be also getting reports of what's going on over there. They're not in isolation. They're just being held in a particular part of a place that's called a wilderness because of their own misbehavior. So it's not like they're just in a vacuum and they don't know anything. So they're hearing about this. It's being narrated to them. The question is, did they learn anything about that? I don't know. Are you learning anything about that? I don't know. Do you like your in-laws? Well, if you don't, were you paying attention when you moved? Were you actually expecting to live where you lived and your daughter grow up right beside a boy that you didn't even like his daddy? And now they're married. Well, could you not have thought that through? If the preacher would have told us something like that, I might have. Well, what preacher is even going into the Bible like this? Hardly any. They just glaze over geography and genealogy. And look how important it was. Now, let's go back to now look, we went from Genesis 10 to Genesis 31. No, we hadn't got to 31 yet. We're going to. Now we're going to go back and we're going to look at Genesis 24 again. Now, we're done with that other. But we're now going to look at the choice that Abraham makes and what we're dealing with in finding Isaac a wife. Abraham is being wise. Abraham has no choice. Let me hydrate here just a minute. It's very difficult for me not to say, that was a big drink. Okay, now folks, you might say, well, what's Abraham doing there? Abraham was told to come to the land of Canaan. It is actually a process, placing himself in an area where he does have to be careful. But you got to bury your dead somewhere. And so we're seeing the results of living in the land if you're not paying attention. Esau is not the kind of person that was paying attention. Now, Abraham is basically a person who is using all good fidelity. What is fidelity? Faithfulness. Now, he does not want to have in-laws, and he surely doesn't want to have more problems like he had with Hagar and Ishmael. That was bad. I'm saying in the sense of it was grievous. It was difficult to deal with. And so now he knows the seed line. He knows that from Isaac, his seed is going to be being blessed, and all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. He knows that God has a tremendously important plan associated with his seed line. And so he is sending back to his homeland, and he sends his servant back to, because we now know that his brother has children, Nahor, and he sends them back to Haran. Now, he basically says, now I'm going to skip this and we're going to come back to it because it's very important. The Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house, spake unto me about the land of my kindred, which spake unto me, and that swear unto me, saying, unto thy seed will I give the land. He shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. We're going to talk about that. How that God is in the scheme of things. I'm not skipping it, but I am trying to get something in front of you, a little bit more about things that you probably would not see connected because they're far removed from each other. We're in Genesis 24, and we need to be in Genesis 31 in order to connect some dots. And we're going to have to introduce somebody else into it, but it really wasn't that big a deal for me to introduce Esau, was it? I mean, you know that Isaac was going to have a wife. You just read that he's going to have a wife. You probably already know that her name is Rebekah. You may not have known that Bethuel was her daddy, and you might not know who her brother is, but you already knew that Isaac was going to have a wife just from Bible study of your own. And you know that there's another son going to be named Jacob. And it's, there's a lot of things that you may already know, but when you leave chapter 24 and then you get all the way to 31, you may have forgotten, or you might not even seen certain things that were laid out that you would pick up on, and you would know this is coming, and it would warn you. Something that takes place would be a warning to you. So let's just go ahead and read. I'm going to widen this out. Let's see, I don't want to widen it too far because I don't want to be in the front of it. But I also don't want to be clicking a lot. All right. If the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from the oath. This my oath, only bring not my son thither again. Now I have to put some little stoppers on there so I know where I've stopped. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and he sware unto him concerning that matter. And the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed. For all the goods of his master were in his hand, and he arose, and he went to Mesopotamia, unto the city of Nahor. Now, you paying attention there? There's a lot of stuff there with that many camels. 10 camels with stuff on them. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water at the time of the evening, even the time that women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Now, let me put another marker here, and I'm going to go up. Show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she shall say, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. And thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness to me. Now, y'all, I am going to touch this. We were on that subject of purloining, like pilfering, taking things that don't belong to yourself, not giving a man a good day's wage. Those kinds of things are extremely important. And you're seeing it right here. Let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she shall say, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. There are a lot of people that just do what they have to do to get by. Now, look what he had actually said. He said, I am looking for the kind of person who will give me a drink, and then she will say, I will give thy camels to drink also. I pray thee that I may drink. And she shall say, I will get you some water, and thy camels will I get a drink also. Now, you think about this. How many things have you missed throughout your life? Do you think because you were not that kind of person? You're that person who just does enough to get by. You know, the difference, say, in working for someone and you do just what the man says, and you say to yourself, well, I'm giving him what he's paying me for. Well, isn't there a scripture in Colossians 3? Is it Colossians 3 that actually says that if you're going to do something, do it heartily as unto the Lord? And you might say, well, I just don't know how that's going to be so important. Really? How important is 10 camel loads, Colossians 3:23, and whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. What's the next verse? Knowing that of the Lord you shall receive the reward of inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Now you think about this. You are doing your job. You have a job, and you're just going to do what you do to get by. Or you're the kind of person that when your boss asks you to do something, you add a little more effort than he asked for. You're always willing. Well, people will take advantage of me. Who are you serving? People? You may be thinking you're serving people. You may even, for some reason, think they're in charge. God is in charge. And this woman actually said, I'll give you a drink, and I'm going to give 10 camels a drink. Also, listen, y'all, this is the kind of woman that you want your son to marry. This is the kind of woman that I married. This is the kind of woman that Caleb married. Willing to do extra. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to do enough to get by. Guess what? That's the wages that you're going to get as far as life is concerned. But if you're the kind of person that is going to put extra effort into it, look at what she could have missed because of just saying, okay, here's your drink. Well, guess what? If you had said, I will also give the camels a drink, you would have inherited all that were on those camels, and your family would have inherited some of it as well. That's not the lesson. I'm just throwing that in right now. It's in there. Oh, it's in there. And thereby shall I know that thou showed kindness unto my master. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that, behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her. And she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, Let me, I pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher. And she said, Drink, my lord. And she hasted and let down her pitcher upon her hand and gave drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking. And she hasted and emptied her pitcher in the trough and ran again into the well to draw water and drew for all 10 camels. It doesn't say 10 there. Well, there were 10 when they started. And the man wondering at her held his peace, to wit, whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. She said, Moreover unto him, we have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head and worshiped the Lord. And he blessed said, Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. The damsel ran and told them of her mother's house these things. And Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. And Laban ran out unto the man unto the well. And it came to pass, when he saw the earrings and the bracelets upon his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister, saying, Thus spake the man unto me, that he came unto the man, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well. Now, I want to make sure that you pay attention right here. Laban comes out, and when he saw the earring and the bracelets on his sister's hand, you might say, okay, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it may not to you in Genesis 24. But let's move ahead to Genesis 31. Why? Well, we're here with the servant of Abraham. Abraham is going to get his son Isaac a wife that will enable him to be able to manage himself in the land of Canaan. Now, Abraham has all of this wisdom, all of this experience stored up from living from the time we saw him 75 to 100, and then even more. He's getting near up to 175 years old. And he is going to make sure that Isaac has a good wife. But you know, even when you find a good wife, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got everything fixed. Laban saw the earring and the bracelet upon his sister's hand, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister, saying, Thus spake the man unto me, that he came unto the man, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well, 10 camels loaded down, and he's basically looking for a place to stay, and he gave my sister 20 shekels weight of gold, bracelets, 10 each, shekels each, and earrings. And he saw the bracelets and the earrings. And he said, Come in, thou blessed of the Lord, wherefore standest thou without? For I have prepared the house and the room for the camels. The camels and the man came into the house, and he ungirded his camels, and gave straw and provender for the camels, and water to wash his feet, the men's feet that were with him. And there was set meat before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have told my errand. And he said, Speak on. Now, let's move ahead. So we have already learned what Esau is doing. Rebekah has 2 children, Jacob and Esau. And we read ahead a while ago, Esau is marrying the sons of Heth and the Hittites. And his mother Rebekah is basically saying, I am weary of my life for how Esau has married. Now Abraham has made sure that Isaac marries well. And Esau is not marrying well, and it's causing problems for Isaac and Rebekah. Now, Rebekah said the last part in Genesis chapter 27. But in Genesis chapter 26, it said both Isaac and Rebekah were not happy with the choices that Esau was making. So basically you enter in then Jacob's decision to get married and the situation that is arranged. And we find ourselves basically then in Genesis chapter 31. Now, in Genesis 31, I don't want us to just like totally spend our time here in the sense that we're going to look at Genesis 31 in its entirety. I just simply want to make the points here that are that we need to be able to warn you ahead of time, and I would hope that you will go back yourself and you'll read it, and let's basically get the information that we need so that you can process it and you can study it later and say, you know what, I'm going to get everything out of this. Because it could be that you're watching today and you are being introduced to Laban for the first time. Genesis 31, verse 20. Notice this. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. Now, I know that I just picked that out, and you're probably saying, what in the world? Jacob spends a lot of time with Laban, and eventually he has to run away. But the point I wanted you to get here was Laban the Syrian. Now, we could have actually seen this in another instance. I don't think that I picked it out in the other place where I think it is, Genesis 25, verse 20. Genesis 25, verse 20. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. So, when you think about Abram sending his son or his servant to get a wife, and he marries Rebekah, he brings Rebekah back, who is the daughter of Bethuel and the sister of Laban, you need to realize that they are Syrians. Now, that's extremely important. Just from the standpoint of, you need to know who we're talking about when we're talking about these individuals, because you're going to see Syrians a lot. Jacob stole away unawares to Laban, the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. Look at verse 19. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. So, not only is Laban a Syrian, not ASS, Assyrian, he is a Syrian. He also is an idol worshiper. And Rachel is affected with this to some degree. But notice, we're basically talking about the kind of person that Laban is. And you might be saying, well, what kind of person is Jacob? He stole away unawares to Laban, and Rachel took the idols. Well, we're not talking about Rachel. We're talking about Laban, and we're talking about Jacob. I want you to notice the kind of person that Laban is. Now, you already saw Laban in Genesis 24. When the man with the 10 camels came up, and he gives his sister 2 bracelets, 10 shekels each of gold weight. Now you remember, and I don't remember what the shekels were on the bracelet, but when Abraham bought the land, the cave of Machpelah, he gave 400 shekels of silver. Now, Abram's servant just gave basically a tip to Rebekah of 20 shekels and whatever the bracelets were of gold. That's a lot. And so Laban is looking at this, and we're looking at Laban. That's the first introduction that we have to Laban, looking at the bracelets and the earrings, and he sees the camels. Now, let's look at him in Genesis 31, verse 41. Now, let me do just a little bit of bringing you up. Jacob is sent by Rebekah back to her brother Laban to find a wife. And he goes there and he sees Rachel. And he wants to marry Rachel. And you probably know the story. Laban tricked him and gave him Leah. And basically told him that he would have to work 7 years for Rachel. He worked for 7 years and he gets Rachel. And it just keeps multiplying, and he is a faithful servant to Laban, and we're just basically looking at the kind of person that Laban is. Now, he's stolen away, and he's basically run away with his goods in the middle of the night. Rachel took the idols as well, but notice this. In Genesis 31, verse 41, we actually get an observation from Jacob about the kind of person that Laban is, the Syrian. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God has seen the affliction, has seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. And Laban answered and said unto Joseph, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle. and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Now, therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone, and he set it up for a pillar. Now, you see this? This is the kind of person, this is the kind of thing that actually takes place in this land, and you need to be aware of it. When someone allows you to marry, or you allow them to marry, you need to realize that things are taking place in people's minds. You see what Laban is basically doing? Laban has not been fair with Jacob at all. He has actually tricked him, and he's been 20 years working for him, 14 for the wives, and he shouldn't have had to do that, and then 6 for the cattle, and Laban is still trying to actually take all of this. And if it hadn't been for him being somewhat afraid of Isaac and Abraham, who is not alive at this point, but yet the fact that these are great men, and he knows that God is blessing them because he knows what has happened with Jacob, he would have taken everything. And then he says to them, he just says, just to set the record straight, these are my cattle, these are my daughters, these are my children. All of this is mine. Now, you might be saying, well, that is one of those things that you call an anomaly. It doesn't happen all the time. Yes, it does. That's Assyrian. Let's look at Genesis chapter 34 and verse 20. Genesis chapter 34 and verse 20. Now, you may say, well, we've already seen this. Maybe you have. When Jacob has all of his children, he has a daughter named Dinah, and the Shechemites actually defile her, Hamor. And Shechem his son came unto the gate of their city and communed with the men of their city, saying, basically, my son has defiled this man's daughter, and my son loves the daughter, and he wants to marry her. And these people of Jacob, these sons of Jacob, they have come up with a plan. If we'll be circumcised, they will allow us to marry. They will allow her to marry. And look what he says. These men are peaceable with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land, and let them trade therein for the land. Behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us to dwell with us, to be one people, if every man, a male, be among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Look at this. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. Now, folks, we need to realize that we are getting some good information right here. When we're talking about God and His prescriptions for our life, did you really, I'm saying, have you really thought to the degree that we're talking about today, when you moved where you moved and you are training up your children and you're trying to figure out how is it that I'm going to make sure that my children don't end up destroying our peace and our welfare? Well, here it is. You have these elements very deeply ingrained in your children's minds. You ever heard this before? I'm saying, did your parents teach you this? Did they tell you when they were making decisions as you were growing up? Like, for instance, as they were having you work, that they were trying to teach you ethics. They were trying to teach you life skills that would help you for the rest of your life. Now, I didn't have that. Pretty much, the men who raised me were not very good in some respects. They were good in some respects. Like, for instance, my dad taught me a trade. I do appreciate that. I know how to lay brick. I knew how to make a living laying brick. I was not going to make a good living. And I do appreciate that. But my dad was a scoundrel in other areas. And I did not have the scoundrel part ingrained in me because my dad did not raise me for the most part. But he did have Christian parents that raised Christian grandparents that raised him. His dad was a scoundrel, and a lot of his information, my dad's information, that was useful came from my great-grandparents who were Christians, members of the Church of Christ. And they instilled some very good principles into my dad's mind and into his brother's mind, one of which was always give a man more than what he's paying you for. And as a result of that, my dad was a cost-plus bricklayer. He always laid brick. He was the individual that you would call on if you were doing special work, and he would do that work for what it cost plus 10%. In other words, what he would normally charge plus 10%, because he was able to do extra things that other people couldn't do. He tried to instill that in me. Now, I didn't learn those particular things, how to do the kinds of things that he could do, but I did learn the principle. I wanted to be the kind of person that would actually be the person that would be called upon if a man wanted a special job to be done. And he wanted somebody who was really able to do it. A lot of people claim to be cost plus, but they're not. You're not going to get what you actually paid for. That's not good as far as a Christian is concerned. Your parents, you should be teaching your children. Give a man extra. The extra that you give, God is seeing, Colossians chapter 3, 23 and 24. God is going to reward you. You just might say, these people will work me to death. No, you don't have to stay in a particular job that you're in if you're not being treated fairly. But our idea of fairness may not actually be what is fair according to the prescription. You may think that the boss owes you something. Once you get these prescriptions in your mind, it enables you to instill these things in your children's mind, and not only the business about the work ethic, but now I had a stepdad as well. He also was a skilled individual. He was a carpenter. He taught me a lot of things, enabled me to be skilled in a lot of different areas. He also knew how to pour concrete, things like that. Myself and my stepbrother did that kind of work together. He also knew how to train horses. I hated that kind of stuff, but he was teaching me. We were helping him to make a living, and he was teaching us. Now, unfortunately, neither one of those men had the skills that we're talking about when it comes down to who you marry and how you set your life up. Where do you live? You don't just willy-nilly make these decisions. These are some of the most important decisions that you will ever make. You know, for me, a great portion of my children's lifetime was spent overseas. That is something that was by design. We wanted to spread the gospel. I want the world to hear the gospel. That's why I do what I do right now. Some individuals may think that I'm doing this television work so that I can be famous. Listen, I don't care anything about fame. If I did, you would actually see me being gone all the time. I'd be out doing meetings. Some of you people that are watching don't know what a meeting is, but in the churches of Christ, if you're able to put good information out there and hold people's attention, people will come from everywhere, and they want to hear good preaching. And the local congregations want men that can actually draw a crowd, and they will pay you big bucks. You would not believe the money that I've been paid for some of the meetings that I was willing to do. And the only reason I did those meetings is because the brethren support me up here. And I had obligations I felt towards them to return the favor. And I would go and hold a preaching, what some individuals would call a revival. I don't mind using the word revival if you're using it right. When folk out there in the sectarian world use it, they're using it wrong. When I say revival, I'm talking about I want to revive the people that are there who are members of the church, get them jumped up, ginned up, ready to go, revved up, and talk to them about evangelism and show them what can be done. And then I also am preaching in such a way as to make a person realize that they're lost. If you have me come and preach, I can tell you this. If you bring a visitor, I'm going to convince that visitor they're going to hell. You might say, well, you're not very successful in meetings. Yes, we're very successful in meetings. What is your preacher trying to get them to think? The first thing that the visitor needs to know is where they're going. because they may be going there faster than they realize, which they could die tomorrow. That's what I'm talking about. I don't waste any time. Try my very best to get them to realize, to believe it, to accept it, that they're in a lost condition. Why? Because the stuff they're doing is not in the Bible. See, the information that we're talking about today, people out in the religious world never hear this. They have never studied any of this information. And that's why their lives are such a mess. And it is the case that oftentimes nowadays in the churches of Christ, people never hear this either. And their lives are a mess. And they feel so bad towards God because they feel, if you are a person who gets what they call hell, fire, and brimstone, that you're actually being kept from having fun. Let me tell you something, folks. Fun is not always beneficial. Fun is a relative term. It may be fun, but it may be something that is going to send you straight to jail. There are plenty of things that are called fun, that the consequences of that behavior could endanger you, your life, and your welfare, of your fortune, all kinds of different things. And so when we're talking about this morning, now let's move back to our text in Genesis 24, and let's look at the segment that I said that we were going to talk about. Now, we did not look at this at the level that I would like to, because I wanted us to get all of the information that the children of Israel were getting when they were hearing this narrated. Those individuals were getting the information that you probably would not have gotten. They were getting all the information having to do with the genealogy and the geography. When Moses said, which is Hebron, that was them being brought up to date on where this cave of Machpelah and all of this, Kirjath Arba, where she died, they're being brought to date. This is Hebron. They were getting this information, and they were getting it over and over. We're just going to go through it one time. And I wanted to make sure that you get what they're getting from the standpoint that you know that, just let me give it to you this way, so that you understand Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 5. When Moses was telling them about tithing, 26:1, this is actually the first fruit of the land. Thou shalt bring it before the Lord in a basket, and bring it to the priest. And it's called worship. Notice this. And thou shalt speak and say before the Lord God, a Syrian ready to perish was my father. And he went down into Egypt and sojourned there with a few, and became there a nation great and mighty and populous. Why did they say that? Why were they instructed to say, my father was a Syrian ready to perish? Because that's what they were. The household of Abraham, his relatives are called Syrians. Well, where did Jacob come from? Jacob is the daughter of Rebekah. Bethuel was a Syrian. And so half his lineage is actually from being a Syrian. Well, who is Bethuel? Bethuel is the nephew of Abraham. Well, if his daddy Nahor is a Syrian, then what does that make Abraham? You see what we're learning here? And this is important. These individuals come from an idolatrous background, and God has put them over here in this land, and it is a dangerous situation where they are, and that's why it's so important for us actually to recognize all of the information that we can about how life is going to be, because our lives are going to be just like this in every aspect. All of these things that we're looking at today, they're happening in our lives as well. And if I've done nothing else today, I would hope that I have created an awareness in your mind that you can find out information from the Word of God that just will satisfy every need that you could possibly come up with. There's an illustration or there's something in the Bible for it. Now, I want to satisfy one last thing, because we were talking about, well, what am I supposed to do? Just up and move? Listen, This is extremely important, this one part. As Abraham was telling his servant, the servant was saying, what's going to happen? What if I can't find a woman that wants to come back with me? And Abraham said unto him, beware thou that thou bring not my son thither again. The Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, unto thy seed will I give this land. He shall send his angel before thee. Make sure you get to see this. He will send his angel before thee. He shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. Listen, folks, do you not realize if God gives us prescriptions, then He is also involved in helping us through the hardships that we encounter associated with the decisions that we make? Do not sell God short. Is Johnny saying that God is sending an angel? Listen, I'm not saying anything to you. You're reading it yourself. God is involved in our lives. He is concerned about our behavior. And if we're going to put ourselves in His care, if we're going to be abiding faithful, all good fidelity, you think God is not going to arrange things? Do you think that basically the system isn't set up so that we'll be able to accomplish the things that He wants us to accomplish, and that He will not be mindful of us in the doing of all of this? Now, what does this have to go to? I want to present this to you right quick. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, and my brain just started getting tired. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 7. How about 9? This is what God's seer named Hananiah said to Asa when Asa was faced with a large obstacle, Syrians. Asa had previously had a battle with Ethiopians, tremendous battle, tremendous number, like 1 million. And he had trusted in God, and he had overcome them. Now the Syrians come against him, and rather than fight them, stand up to them, he chooses another direction. And Hananiah says, for the eyes of the Lord, or Jehovah, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards Him. Complete, faithful is the idea. So what are we actually saying here? We're saying to you that from our lesson last week, when Hagar was sent out and she thought that Ishmael was going to die, she was able to see a well that she had not seen. God opened her eyes. And we touched on this last week. And we're going to touch on it again because you need to hear it over and over and over. The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong for those whose heart is perfect before Him. The eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and His ears are open unto their prayers. 1 Peter 3:12 says. Now, what am I building up to? Listen, you can make these decisions. You can go and search for the kinds of things that we're talking about here. You can search for the right place to live. Do you realize that when the calves were introduced in Israel by Jeroboam, that the Levites left the land where the 10 tribes were? They left the land and they came to Jerusalem. They came in and around where Judah was, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. Why? You're going to live in an area where heathenism is the rule. You're going to live in an area where they are setting up an alternative kind of worship. And you're basically going to say, well, this is where we're from. What are we supposed to do? Move? Yeah. That is exactly right. You don't have to stay. There is not this business about, well, I have to stay here. My mother's here. my father's here, my grandparents here. You do not have to do anything that is contrary to God's word because of anybody. That's a choice that you end up making. Well, Johnny, I cannot believe that you are saying this. I cannot believe that you're answering back at this point, because you know that I'm not going to tell you something that actually isn't in the Bible. Do you know that when we are talking about our relatives, that there is so much in the Bible that is actually said about our relatives? Think not that I am come to send peace on the earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father and daughter, and against her mother and daughter-in-law. And a man's foe shall be they of his own house. Do you realize that this is constant throughout the New Testament? In Jesus' own life, he ended up having to tell individuals that his mother and his brethren were actually those that he was teaching. Now, in another place in Matthew chapter 8, he is talking to a disciple, and another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. Jesus said unto him, follow me, and let the dead bury the dead. You see how this goes? Now, someone is possibly thinking right now, I didn't tell you the scripture, did I? That's Matthew chapter 8, verse 22. And now I'm headed to Mark, and I want you to notice how individuals will treat you. And when I told you earlier that people talk to me all the time like dirt, treat me like dirt and talk to me like a dog, I don't care. That doesn't bother me really in the least. I am nobody, and I am following God my Father, and so it really just doesn't matter. This is Mark chapter 3, verse 20. And the multitude cometh together again, so that they could not so much as eat bread. And when his friends, or can be translated family, this is Mark 3:21, when his friends heard of it, they went out to lay hold on him, for they said, he is beside himself. Do you not realize that when you start following these principles, that your family members will actually think that you've lost your mind? When we didn't let our kids play sports, there's just all kinds of people said stuff to us. Now, listen, y'all, I am not saying it's a sin for your kids to play sports. We're talking principles here. We're talking about what comes first. If you're going to have your kids playing sports and they're not coming to Bible class, then you've got your priorities in the wrong place. Well, Johnny, you're just making this, then you just go right ahead, because I can tell you what to expect. You can expect Esau. If you are profane and you're not spiritual, then you can go ahead and expect your children to end up being like Esau, marrying from the land, and it being a grief and a weariness to you later on. Well, why are you saying that? Well, for one thing, your grandkids are not going to be the kind of grandkids that you wanted to have. You could have just a whole quiver full of little hellions. What does that mean? Individuals that are acting like their father the devil, John 8:44. Why? Because their daddy or their mama, your in-laws. That's why. So you just go ahead. If you don't like the information that you're getting here, well, what are we supposed to do, Johnny? Genesis 24:7. Do you not think that God is aware of your plight? Do you think that God is not providing for you? That his eyes are not looking at you? That he's not paying attention to you? You see, that's the biggest tool the devil has, is to try to make you think that you're estranged from God. Well, I've sinned. So what? Look at the things that we have seen take place in Abraham's life, and we'll say in Isaac's life, in Rachel's life, and in the children of Jacob, the children of Israel. We're going to see things just in a very short time frame that you'll end up saying, what in the world? Why in the world would God use these individuals? Listen, this is what God has to work with. All of us are basically this way. You're going to be making mistakes, but the question is will you be looking at prescriptions, commandments? Will you realize that these commandments are good for you? They are actually they're going to be a light and a lamp. I want to look at Romans chapter 2 with you right now in this context. Romans chapter 2, because this is really the best thing that I can actually think of at this particular point to try to encourage you to work on this and to realize how it does work. Now, Paul is basically trying to make the Jews realize they're really not any better. They are in a better position in that they had more information. The oracles were given to them, Romans chapter 3, verse 1. But just because they had it didn't mean they were doing it. And an individual can just be they can actually be worse having the information, because in Matthew chapter 6, it describes that when a person who has the light and that light becomes darkness, how great is that darkness? It's a greater amount of darkness that overcomes the light that you had to start with. And that's why Peter would end up saying that it's like the dog eating its own vomit. That's how bad you get. So there's individuals that have plenty of information and it doesn't do them any good. And so Paul is talking to the Jews about this very thing, and he says, for when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves. Now when we're talking about them doing by nature, we're talking about long-standing practice. The laws of God have been dispersed all through the known world during this time frame and prior to it. You might say, how in the world can you say that? How in the world can you doubt it? Do you not know who Nebuchadnezzar is? Nebuchadnezzar was the ruler, basically the power of the world in the time frame when the children of Israel were in Babylonian captivity. Well, what did they learn? They learned on more than one occasion that the God of the heaven and the earth, who is the ruler of all things therein, is the ruler in all kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar learned that the hard way. And so you have Daniel, who set the entire kingdom on its ear. You have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego set the whole kingdom on its ear and convinced these kings that there is a God that is different than the rest of these gods. So these folk have been inundated throughout the years. God just does not leave people without any kind of information. And you might be saying, well, people in China, what about people in China? Who is China's largest customer? Americans. And what do we spend? We spend green pieces of paper that says, in God we trust. Do you not think those individuals think about that when they see that on a dollar? Folks, you've got to realize how this procedure works. When I was living overseas, basically all of these island people, the reason they appreciated America and the religion of America is because they were under imperial Japan, and the Japanese basically were saying that their emperor was God and that he was powerful. Well, guess what? The Americans came along and they overpowered the Japanese, and you know what that made those islanders think and say about America's God? He is superior. Well, what kind of war were we fighting? A world war. And America's God was superior to all of the religions of the world, all their different gods, whether it's Germany and their atheism, or Russia and their atheism, China and its communism, Japan and its imperialism. It did not matter. The God of America actually is the God that remedied the World War twice. And there are people everywhere that respect the God of America. Right now, I don't think the God of America respects America because of the way America is behaving itself. But here's my point. This was the point. We're talking about you being able to manage this and to realize what Genesis 24:7 was saying when Abraham said he shall send his angel. You didn't see an angel. You just basically are hearing how God's providence is set up. He didn't see an angel. Things happened as he went about trying to be faithful. And that's what we're saying. God is able to provide if you will be serving him in all good fidelity. Now watch, here's how it goes. This is Romans 2:15. What shows? For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which show The work of the law written in their hearts. When they do these things that are actually contained in the law as a result of long-standing practice, there are plenty of people in America that do not care one thing about the Constitution and don't even know what it says. But are they doing what the Constitution says on a daily basis? Yes. Well, is it like second nature to them? Yes. Why? Because it's instilled in all of us. It's long-standing practice. It's the way we do things in America. Well, I've never read the Constitution. I don't care if you have, but you're doing a lot of things that the Constitution says to do. See how this works? God's law was dispensed out. He's not just leaving these people in a vacuum, but notice this, which show the work of law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness. Now this is really where we are. Their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts, the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. Can I tell you this? A lot of individuals are excusing a lot of behavior that they ought to actually have accused by their conscience. Your conscience should be working on you. I don't like conscience, someone says. Well, I didn't say that your conscience actually is your guide. This is your guide. If your conscience is taught, if it has the prescriptions, and the prescriptions, look at this, y'all. This is just 1 John chapter 5, verse 3. 1 John 5. I'm not going to get this. 1 John 5, verse 3. For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not grievous. Look at this. The prescriptions are not grievous. You do these things. You allow your conscience to be taught and to do its job, which is to accuse things that are not going to be useful. These prescriptions we say that our doctors give us, sometimes they say don't mix these things because they'll give you an adverse effect. Your conscience needs to be taught. It needs to be taught in regard to how you're going to raise your children, how you're going to try to encourage them to do certain things, and you're not going to be involved in other things. And your children likely are going to, their wills are going to be strong, and they're going to want to do certain things just like you want to do certain things as a parent that you might not get to do because you're responsible for these children and their upbringing. Just don't do it if you don't want to, and see how your grandchildren turn out. You see what I'm saying? If you don't do these prescriptions, if you don't follow these prescriptions, if you don't learn them, did we learn some good stuff today? Y'all, this strengthened me and encourages me, and it's what helps me to endure as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, because I don't want you to suffer through a lot of mistakes. Well, is it difficult for you, Johnny? Absolutely, it's difficult for me. Members of the church fight back, push back. They just act all kinds of crazy. Well, so what do? What do you mean, what do I do? I endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. I set myself to do extra because I'm doing this unto the Lord. I'm not worried about somebody taking advantage of me. Colossians 3:23 is deeply ingrained and embedded in my brain. The Lord is the one who rewards. I'm not interested in people's pleasures and being pleasing to them. I like being at peace, but I'm not going to have peace and compromise your actual well-being by not telling you the truth. Appreciate you for being on our school today, being with us on our school, in our school, and we hope that you did enjoy it. Tell a friend. Make sure that you remember us on YouTube, and also the books that I did not mention. Man, that was a slip up on my part. I have all kinds of books here today. I have Foy Wallace, The Current Issues. You definitely want this one. You need to make sure you ask for it by name, current, and you just roll this back. You don't have to write this right now. Jesus as a Controversial. It's a 100-year-old book. I'm going to skip that one for this time frame. Arkansas Angels, back in print. A Baptist Manual from 1890-some, 100-something-year-old book. This is a great book, too. Early Relation and Separation of the Baptists and the Disciples, written by Eric Gates, Ph.D., about 100 years old, too. He was University of Chicago. Go back in the tape and ask for these. Bible Wines is a great book talking about the effects of alcohol and how whether certain amounts of alcohol, what it does, what the scholars actually say this individual used to think one thing about alcohol, and then he changed his mind. Bible Wines. It is a very good book. Always ask for, what does the Bible say? God bless you. Good afternoon.
The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its employees, or ownership.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday evening edition of Star Talk. I'm Ken Eccles, and we're happy to have you with us tonight. I'm just making my grocery list here. If you could just pardon me for just one moment. There's only 24 hours in the day. I don't have time to do this until I get here. Now, there are the phone numbers right there on the screen, and there's the email address, so you can call us or email us. You have 2 minutes. Here it goes. 2 minutes. The clock will not run while I am talking. I will not talk away your time. Don't think I'm doing that. So when I'm talking, I'll stop the clock, but when you're talking, the clock runs. And you have 2 minutes to deliver your news to the public, whatever it may be. I have a couple of emails to read here. I like to get these out of the way early, the really searching and weighty ones. I like to get done quickly. Jonathan, this one concerns you. Okay. If you're listening. Emailer says, Ken, I wonder if Jonathan knows who the Zigzag Man is. Well, Jonathan, are you familiar with the Zigzag Man?
I am not. I do not know.
You don't know who the Zigzag Man is? Emailer, he doesn't know who the Zigzag Man is. The Zigzag Man, Jonathan, is a guy whose picture used to appear, and I probably does appear still, even to this day. I don't know. I haven't bought any rolling papers lately, but the Zigzag Man's picture used to be on what was considered far and away the cream of rolling papers, the very best rolling papers, Zigzag brand rolling papers. And his picture, he looked like he was maybe a French soldier from the 19th century, wearing those big puffy pants things, and a soldier's uniform, and he was the Zigzag Man. They used to advertise, in fact, rolling papers are legal. Nothing illegal about rolling papers. They used to do ads where you'd see the Zigzag Man kind of pointing out at you or holding. I don't remember exactly how he was posed. But there was a word balloon there. It said, Captain Zigzag is what it says. And that's who the Zigzag